So your obviously, since we're going to be doing a zipper install, you would want to make sure that your CD is mounted, because at this point you would not have internet access, as I don't. Your CD is mounted, and you have, did I cover how to set static addresses in OpenSUSE last semester? I think I did. The client, I had you guys configure the machine's static. All right, so yeah, definitely through YAS. I just wanted to make sure. It just hit me like, did I cover that last semester? Okay, so DHCP, I want to install. I'm going to install actually the daemon, and I'm going to install the YAS component. Okay, and then we're going to go into YAS to enable it, and then we'll take a look at ways to manage it from the command line as opposed to from YAS. But obviously you can do it from either way. This keyboard is not sitting right for me. Okay, so again, zipper install dhcp-server, okay, is the first module that we are going to install. Obviously answer yes to that. And then after installing that, we're going to zipper install YAST 2-dhcp-server. Once that's done, I'm going to go into YAST. And under Network Services, notice now I have DHCP. It also installed DNS, by the way, so we'll actually look at DNS in a couple weeks. Okay, so I'm going to go into DHCP, and I'll go through the settings that need to be configured, and then we'll take a look at the configuration file that gets created. Okay, so first thing you're going to do is you have to select the network adapter that you want. Just like in Microsoft, guys, when we configured DHCP, we had to bind the DHCP protocol to the appropriate adapter. Okay, remember, right now we only have one network adapter. We're going to eventually have two, so we want to make sure that even when we do that, we'll take a closer look at that again, make sure that it didn't bind to that second card. But you do have to select it. So you do, it's obviously, I only have one here, so it's already selected in regards to highlighted, but you do need to click on select, and you'll see the little X over here. Okay, so that has selected the network adapter that my DHCP protocol is going to be bound to, which means that's the network adapter that's going to be listening for those discover packets. Okay, I'm going to click on next. Actually, open firewall. Okay, and then click on next. Okay, so this screen, in reality, at this point in time, we don't need to fill in anything. Okay, we don't have a gateway yet. Okay, the settings that you place here would be the settings that your clients would receive. Okay, so I don't have a gateway yet. I don't have DNS configured yet. I'm not using an NTP server. We don't have WINS or print servers. So all I want to focus on initially right now is this default lease time. Okay, the rest of these values at some point, once I do configure DNS, once I do configure NAT, then we'll come back into the DHCP server and adjust the settings that the client actually receives. Okay, so the default lease time, this particular screen, notice it says global settings up here. Okay, so global settings mean when we look at the next screen, it's going to allow us to create a subnet that that contains the range of IP addresses that are going to be doled out to the computers on my network. I can also configure a lease time within the subnet. Okay, if I do, then the lease time within the subnet is going to be used. If I don't, then the global will be used. So if I have multiple subnets, some of them have a lease time, others don't, the global will be used if there's nothing configured within the actual subnet. So you can see that the default lease time is actually only 4 hours. I'm just going to change that to days just because I think 4 hours is too short. Okay, so I'm going to click on next. And now notice it's actually asking me for that range of IP addresses. Okay, my computers, and I will tell you, just as in the Windows classes, what network you're on in the homework assignments. But my computer is actually on 192.168.232. Okay, and my server's IP address is .10. So again, looking back at the Windows class, okay, looking at the strategies. What is your strategy? If you're defining this, are you defining the entire range, .1 to 254? Okay, if so, then at some point you'll have to create an exclusion, which aren't really exclusions in Linux, but you could create an exclusion. Or you could say, you know what, from 25 to 154 or 254 is my range. Anything below 25 is what I'm going to use for anything that I need to be static. Okay, so again, just as with Microsoft, you have to stop and think, what is my range going to be? I don't want to include my server's address as part of the range, so I'm going to go with the 25 to 254. Okay, so I'm going to go with 232.25, and the last IP address 192.168.232.250. No, yeah, I'm going to go to 100 for now. Okay, just for now, because I want to tweak something after. Okay. So this bottom screen, this bottom portion, lease time 4 hours. So that is, again, within this scope, if you will, even though they're not called scopes here, but I try to use Windows terminology and hopefully clarify it. Okay, so within this this subnet area, if an IP address is assigned from within this range, then the 4 hours is what's going to be used. I'm going to change that to 8 days. Okay. And here's the maximum, guys. Okay, so this is the maximum I mentioned earlier. So I could say here the maximum is 20 days. So that would mean, and again, I have not been able to figure out with this new client how to have a client make the request, but that's what that setting is allows when a client does a request to renew with the appropriate command, it renews the IP address with the default lease time. Unless the client says, oh, I want a lease time longer than the default, I want it for 20 days. If the maximum is set to 20 days, then they would be able to make that request. If the maximum were set to 10 days and they made a request of 20, they would not be able to get that request. So that's what this maximum is, okay? It's basically the maximum amount of time that a client can request that the lease be extended, assuming you can figure out how to do it with the client, okay? Okay, so I'm going to click on next here. Obviously, I want this service to be started at boot, so I'm going to make sure that the service starts when booting and not manually. Otherwise, I'll have to manually start it every time I start the computer, which would not be a good thing. And I'm going to click on Finish. We'll come back and look at expert configuration later. We're not quite experts yet. Okay, so I'm going to exit here, okay, and then I'm going to take a look at the configuration file that was created and where it lives. Okay, so it's actually called dhcpd.conf, and it's in the Etsy directory. So I'm going to actually I'm just going to cat it. Okay, I'm going to cat the dhcpd.conf file, and you can see the file's contents. Okay, so you can see the default lease time. This is in the global area. I don't know why my mouse looks like that. What the hell just happened? I am just having major keyboard problems today. There we go. Okay, so default lease time, you can see, yeah, that number is the number of seconds in however, what, 4 days? 8. No, the outside one was 4. This one was 8, and this is 20, right? The global is outside. So this out here, outside the subnet, anything outside the subnet are global settings. Okay, so if I had multiple subnets, these settings would apply to all of the subnets. Anything within the subnet obviously only applies to that subnet. But yeah, the number that is used here is not what I would consider very user-friendly, right? I mean, that's actually, I know that I set the global maximum to 4 days. I set the subnet, I set the global default to 4 days. I set the subnet default to 8 days and the subnet maximum to 20 days. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is that whether you realize it or not, there are 345,600 minutes in... Seconds, isn't it? No, minutes, I'm sorry. Did I say seconds? It's minutes. Yeah. There are 345,600 minutes in 4 days. So if you manually change this, I don't know why they did this, and I don't know whether there's a way that you can change it to, but that's that value. Okay, and then obviously the syntax here, every line ends in a semicolon. Okay, subnet, because this is a grouping, the subnet 190 shows you the subnet, shows you the net mask, and then open squiggly brackets, the range, the default lease time, the maximum lease time. Okay, close squiggly brackets. If I wanted to make changes to this file, I could VI this file. Okay, and if I VI the file, then I would need to stop and start the service, and that service's name is DHCPD. Okay, so if I VI this file, and I wanted to change the range from 100 to 110 for whatever reason, just to make a change here, and I can save it. And then I would need to do two things, okay? The first thing that you should do is, much like when we had to change, when we made a change to the exports file, we always ran a command that checked the syntax. Okay, my recommendation would be that if you manually make a change to the dhcp.conf file, that you check the syntax before restarting the service. Okay, and the way that you check the syntax is with the command rc dhcpd check -syntax. If there were problems, done over here, done, you can't see it in the video, guys, you probably can see the D, but done is what it will say over on the right. If there were problems, then you would see those problems. It would tell you what line the problem occurred on. Okay, so as long as the syntax is correct, then you would restart the service. So to restart the service, again, systemctl, restart, and then the service name, dhcpd. Okay, that's the server side. We all set with the server side for now. Okay, now going to the client. So again, my client right now is configured with a static address. So obviously what I need to do is go into YAST and change that. Okay, so I want to get rid of any of the static settings that I currently have on my client. Come on. Something's not right. It's coming. I don't know why it's so slow. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go into YAST. And within YAST, again, under system network settings. I hesitated because I thought the same thing. Under system and then network settings, this is where your network adapters are. And I'm sure there's a way to do this from the command prompt, guys. I probably have it somewhere in my notes, but it's just too much typing. So again, at this point you can see that it's actually showing you the IP address of this adapter. I'm going to change this. I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to change this to dynamic. Okay. Again, I'm going to click on next. I'm going to make sure that any other settings are not manually configured here. I shouldn't have DNS. I shouldn't have routing. So again, as long as now it shows DHCP and I OK out, and here's where I cross my fingers. Only because for some reason, I don't know why, it should automatically at this point, as YAST is shutting down and as YAST, it should be sending out a Discover packet to the server now that it's a DHCP client. My experience with this version of OpenSUSE is that it doesn't always work, that I have to reboot, which I shouldn't have to, but let's see if I have an IP address. So ifconfig, oops. ifconfig, sure, I do. So that's awesome. It worked. Okay, my point is that don't assume that you didn't get an error message, that it didn't work, that it worked. Go out to the command prompt, do an ifconfig, make sure that you actually have an IP address within the pool of IP addresses that you've defined. So I can see here that the 192.168.232.25 is the IP address that my client now has. If for some reason you're not seeing the Ethernet adapter at all, then I would just don't bother trying any of the commands, just reboot. Okay, because it'll definitely take at reboot. I don't know why sometimes I have to do that, and I did have to do it on the before class server, so I was really expecting to have to do it on the in-class server. Okay, questions so far? So let's kind of keep this